The small neighborhood where Lily lived was quiet and ordinary, the kind of place where mornings began with the sound of birds and the distant hum of school buses. Most people kept to themselves, busy with work, family, or simply their routines. But Lily was different. She had a gentle heart that noticed the things others overlooked. Every morning before heading to her job at the local bakery, she would water the little plants on her balcony and wave at the few neighbors she saw. One of them was an elderly man who lived 2 houses away. His name was Mr. Thompson. He lived alone in an old brick house that looked like it hadn't been repainted in years. The garden was overgrown, the mailbox leaned slightly to one side, and the curtains always stayed half-drawn. Lily didn't know much about him, except that he rarely came out except to sit on his front porch in the evenings. She often saw him there, wearing an old brown sweater and holding a cup of tea, his eyes fixed on the empty street ahead. For weeks, Lily wondered if he had any family. He never had visitors. No children stopped by. No one brought him groceries or checked in on him. Sometimes she'd see him carrying a small bag from the corner store, just a loaf of bread or a can of soup. It broke her heart a little to see someone so alone. One chilly afternoon when she was returning from work, she noticed Mr. Thompson struggling with his grocery bag. The paper bag had torn and apples rolled down the sidewalk. Without thinking, Lily ran over and helped pick them up. "Oh dear, I'm so sorry," the old man said, bending down slowly, his hands shaking slightly. "It's okay, really," Lily replied, smiling. "Here, let me help you carry these." He hesitated, looking embarrassed. "I can manage, miss, you've got your own things." "Nonsense," she said kindly. "It's no trouble at all." She carried the bag up the short path to his porch and placed it near the door. Inside she could see the faint light of a small lamp in the corners of a modest living room, old furniture, faded curtains, and a bookshelf filled with dusty novels. "Thank you," he said softly. "People don't usually stop to help these days." Lily smiled. "Well, maybe they should." He gave a faint chuckle, almost surprised by her warmth. "You're right about that." That brief encounter stayed with her. That night, while eating her dinner, she couldn't stop thinking about how frail he had looked, and how lonely. His home felt like a place where time had stopped, quiet and forgotten. She wondered if he had anyone to talk to, anyone to share meals with. The next evening, she cooked extra soup, chicken and vegetable, the kind her mother used to make. She poured some into a clean container, added a piece of bread, and walked to his house. Her heart pounded as she knocked on the door. It took a while before she heard footsteps. The door opened slowly, and there stood Mr. Thompson, wearing the same brown sweater, his expression puzzled. "Good evening," Lily said, smiling nervously. "I made some extra dinner and thought you might like some." He blinked, as if unsure how to respond. "Oh, you didn't have to do that." "I know," she said gently. "But I wanted to." He looked at the container in her hands for a long moment, then finally nodded. "That's very kind of you, thank you." She handed it to him, and for the first time he smiled fully, a small, genuine smile that lit up his tired face. "Would you like to come in?" he asked. Lily shook her head politely. "Maybe another time. I just wanted to drop this off before it got cold." "All right then," he said softly. "Thank you again, miss." "Lily," she said. "I live 2 houses down." He nodded. "Lily, that's a lovely name. I'm Henry Thompson." "I know," she said with a grin. "It's nice to finally meet you properly." That night, as Lily washed the dishes, she couldn't help but smile. Something about his shy gratitude made her heart warm. The next evening, when she returned from work, there was a small knock on her door. When she opened it, Mr. Thompson stood there, holding her empty container, freshly washed. "I just wanted to return this," he said. The soup was delicious. Haven't had something homemade like that in a long time. "I'm glad you liked it," Lily said. He hesitated a moment, then added quietly, "It reminded me of my wife's cooking. She passed some years ago. Used to make chicken soup every Sunday." Lily felt a lump in her throat. I'm sorry, she said softly. He nodded, looking down. Life gets quiet when you get old. After that day, Lily began bringing him food more often. At first, just once or twice a week. Leftover stew, pasta, sometimes freshly baked muffins from the bakery. But soon it became a daily thing. She'd knock on his door around 6 in the evening and he'd always be waiting, his porch light glowing dimly. They started talking more too. Small talk at first, about the weather, about her job, about the plants on her balcony. But slowly the conversations grew longer. He told her stories from his youth, how he had once owned a small repair shop, how he met his wife at a local dance, how they used to travel by train just for the fun of it. His eyes would light up as he spoke, and Lily would listen, genuinely interested. Sometimes he'd ask about her life. "Don't you have family nearby?" he asked one evening, sipping the tea she'd brought him. "My parents live in another town," Lily said. "I moved here for work. It's quiet, but I like it." He nodded. Quiet is nice, but sometimes it's too quiet. That line stayed with her. She realized that for him, quiet meant lonely. As weeks passed, she started to notice small changes in him. He smiled more. His house looked a bit tidier. She even saw him sweeping his porch one morning, humming softly to himself. It was like her visits had brought life back into his world. One Friday evening, as they sat together on his porch watching the sunset, he said, "You know, Lily, you remind me of my son when he was younger. Kind, full of energy. He used to help everyone in the neighborhood." Lily smiled. "You must be proud of him." He nodded slowly. "I was. Still am, I suppose. But we haven't spoken in years." "May I ask why?" she said gently. He sighed, his gaze distant. He moved away, made a big life for himself, far from here. We disagreed on things and, well, life got in the way. It's funny how time passes. You think you'll make up one day, but somehow the years slip by. Lily didn't press further. She could see the sadness behind his eyes, and she didn't want to stir painful memories. But she wished she could do something, anything, to help him feel less forgotten. That night she brought him a small potted plant, a bright green fern. "Something to keep you company," she said with a smile. He laughed softly. "You're spoiling me now." "Then I'm doing my job right," she said, grinning. From then on, they had their little evening ritual. She'd bring dinner, he'd tell a story. Sometimes they laughed, sometimes they sat quietly, just sharing the comfort of another person's company. It wasn't about the food anymore. It was about connection. Neighbors began to notice, too. They'd see the lights on in his house again, hear the faint sound of conversation and laughter. A few even mentioned how nice it was to see him smiling. One afternoon, when Lily returned from work, she found a small note taped to her door. It read, "Dinner was wonderful as always. You make an old man's days brighter. Thank you, Lily. Henry." She folded the note carefully and placed it inside her journal. It felt good to know that her simple kindness had made such a difference. As autumn deepened, the evenings grew colder, and she began bringing hot soups, casseroles, and tea. Sometimes she'd sit with him under a blanket on the porch, watching the leaves fall. The silence between them was comfortable, like two friends who didn't need to fill every moment with words. She never imagined that a small act, sharing a meal, could lead to something so meaningful. It wasn't grand or dramatic. It was just human. One person caring about another. But what Lily didn't know then was that her daily kindness had reached far beyond the old man's heart. Her simple meals and conversations were not only giving him warmth in his final days, but also connecting her to a story she couldn't yet imagine, a story that would soon change her life forever. Days turned into weeks, and weeks slowly turned into months. What began as a small gesture, a bowl of soup, a few warm words, had become a daily routine for Lily and Mr. Thompson. Each evening around 6, she would carry a tray to his porch, sometimes with homemade stew, sometimes just a sandwich and tea, and every evening he would be there waiting for her, his porch light glowing like a quiet invitation. Lily often wondered when it had started to feel so natural. Maybe it was the way he smiled when she arrived, or how he always said, right on time, as if her visit was the best part of his day. To her, it no longer felt like charity. It felt like visiting family. One evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of orange, Lily sat with him outside. The air smelled faintly of rain, and the wind rustled the dry leaves across the porch. "You always bring so much food," he said with a chuckle. "You'll spoil me." Lily laughed softly. "Well, you deserve it. I can't let you eat those canned soups every night." He smiled. "My wife used to say the same thing. She loved cooking. I could barely make toast without burning it." That was how most evenings went, easy, comfortable. He would tell her stories and she would listen. She loved hearing about his younger days, how he built his first car engine from scratch, how he and his wife used to dance in their tiny living room to old jazz records. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked once. "Every day," he said quietly. "But memories are kind. They let you relive moments without pain if you let them." Lily smiled. "That's beautiful." He looked at her then, with eyes that seemed to hold decades of stories. "You know," he said softly, "I haven't talked this much in years. I'd forgotten how good it feels just to have company." That made her heart ache a little. After that night, Lily started spending more time there. Sometimes they played old board games. Other times they just sat quietly, listening to the sound of crickets. He began showing her things from his past, black and white photos, an old pocket watch, letters tied neatly with a ribbon. One evening, while sorting through a small box, he pulled out a photograph and handed it to her. It showed a young couple standing beside a blue car, both smiling brightly. "That's me and my wife," he said, his voice soft with nostalgia. "That was the day we bought our first car together. I rebuilt the engine myself," Lily smiled. "You both look so happy." "Oh, we were," he said, eyes distant. "We didn't have much money back then, but we had dreams. We thought the world was ours." He paused, and his voice trembled slightly when he added, "We wanted to have a big family, and we did for a while. Our son came along, clever boy, full of ambition. I thought he'd stay close, take over my workshop one day." "What happened?" Lily asked gently. He sighed, looking down at his hands. "He wanted more. I can't blame him for that. He was smart, too smart for this small town. He wanted to see the world, build something of his own. I told him to chase his dreams, but when he left, something changed between us. Calls became rare, letters stopped. Then one day they just stopped altogether." Lily sat quietly. She could see how much it still hurt him. "Did he ever come back?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "No, not once." There was a long silence. The sound of the wind filled the space between them. "I guess he has his own life now," Mr. Thompson said. "People move on. That's how it goes." Lily wanted to say something comforting, but she didn't know what words could make up for years of loneliness. So instead, she reached over and placed her hand gently on his. "I'm sure he still thinks about you," she said quietly. He looked at her and smiled faintly. "Maybe. But don't worry, Lily, you've filled this old man's evenings better than he ever could." Lily smiled back, but in her heart she wished he could reconnect with his son. After that talk, she often caught him glancing at the old photograph on his shelf. She could tell he missed his family deeply, even if he tried to hide it behind small jokes and stories. Winter came early that year. The air turned crisp and frost formed on the windows each morning. Lily worried about him. His joints ached and the cold made him cough. So she started bringing him thick blankets and hot meals every evening. One night, when she arrived, she found him sitting by the fire inside, staring at the flames. "You shouldn't be out in this cold," he said as she stepped in. "I'm fine," she replied with a grin. "Besides, someone has to make sure you eat properly." He chuckled. "You're stubborn, you know that?" "So I've been told." She placed the food on the table, roasted chicken and vegetables still steaming, and sat down across from him. For a while they ate quietly, the only sound coming from the crackling fire. After dinner, she noticed a small notebook on the side table. Its cover was worn and the pages looked yellowed. "What's that?" she asked. He hesitated, then handed it to her. "That's my journal. Been writing in it for years. Mostly letters I never sent." "Letters?" He nodded. "To my son. Every time I wanted to talk to him, I wrote instead. It made me feel like maybe he could hear me somehow." Lily flipped through a few pages. The handwriting was shaky but neat. She saw entries dated years apart. words full of love, regret, hope. Some were short. Others filled entire pages. "Do you want me to help you find him?" she asked gently. He shook his head. "No, if he wanted to come back, he would. I've made peace with it. Sometimes life doesn't give you the ending you expect." She didn't argue, but his words stayed with her. Over the next few weeks, Lily's visits became longer. She started helping him with small chores, tidying the house, sorting mail, even fixing the squeaky door that had bothered him for months. The more time they spent together, the more she realized how much he had given up on expecting anything from life. But she also noticed something else, how much lighter he seemed when he talked. The loneliness that once filled his eyes was slowly being replaced with a quiet peace. One evening, after finishing dinner, he said, "You know, Lily, you've done something wonderful for me." She tilted her head, smiling. "What's that?" "You reminded me what kindness feels like. You didn't have to, but you did it anyway." She smiled softly. "Well, it's not a big deal." "Oh, but it is," he said. "You see, when you get old, people stop seeing you. You become invisible. But you looked, you cared. That's rare." His words touched her deeply. She didn't think of herself as doing anything special. She just couldn't stand to see someone lonely. Later that week, when she got home from work, she found a small wrapped package at her door. Inside was a delicate silver locket with an old-fashioned design. There was a note attached that read, "For the kindest soul I've ever met. Thank you for reminding me that there's still goodness in this world." H.T. Lily smiled through tears. She wore the locket every day after that. By the time spring arrived, Mr. Thompson had become like family. She told him about her day at work, her plans for the future, and he always listened patiently. Sometimes he'd tease her about her cooking, saying, "Needs a little more salt," just to make her laugh. But there were also days when he seemed tired, his steps slower, his hands trembling a little more. Lily noticed, but he brushed it off, saying he was just getting old. She started bringing groceries for him every weekend and made sure his medicine cabinet was full. He would always protest, saying she was doing too much, but she never listened. "It's no trouble," she would say. "You've got me now," and he would smile, that same quiet, grateful smile that had once been rare, but had now become a part of him. What Lily didn't realize, though, was how deeply her kindness had affected him, how every meal, every laugh, every small visit had filled a part of his heart that had been empty for years. Sometimes, when she left his house in the evenings, he would watch her walk away from his porch, the glow of her laughter lingering in the air, and when the door closed, he would whisper softly to himself, "Thank you, my dear girl. You've given me more than you know." But somewhere in the back of his mind, a thought had started forming, a thought about how he could repay her one day. He had lived long enough to know that life had a strange way of connecting people, and that maybe, just maybe, his story with Lily wasn't finished yet. The days had grown warmer again, and the trees were full of green leaves. It had been almost a year since Lily first met Mr. Thompson, and their friendship had become a part of her daily life. She couldn't imagine a day without stopping by his house after work. It was as natural to her as brushing her hair in the morning or feeding her cat before bed. But one Friday evening, something felt off. Lily came home a bit later than usual. She quickly packed a meal of beef stew and bread, just the way he liked it, and hurried down the familiar path to his porch. The light outside his house was off. That was strange, and he always left it on when expecting her. She knocked softly on the door. "Mr. Thompson?" "It's me, Lily." There was no answer. She waited, then knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. The silence made her uneasy. She tried peeking through the window, but the curtains were drawn. A faint worry began to grow inside her. She went around to the back door and tried knocking there too, but again there was no sound. Her hands started to tremble slightly. "Please be okay," she whispered. She decided to call his name louder, hoping he was just asleep. "Mr. Thompson," she shouted, her voice echoing into the quiet evening. No response came. Lily's stomach turned. Something wasn't right. She ran back to her apartment and called the local emergency number, explaining that she was worried about her elderly neighbor who hadn't answered his door. Within minutes, an ambulance and a police car arrived. Lily stood on the porch, her heart pounding, as the officers knocked and then gently pushed open the door. The hinges creaked softly. They called out for him several times, but there was still no reply. One of the officers motioned for her to wait outside. She stood there gripping the edge of her sweater, praying silently. A few minutes later, one of them came out, his expression kind but heavy. "Miss," he said softly, "I'm afraid he passed away. Looks like he went peacefully in his sleep." The words hit her like a wave. For a moment she couldn't move or speak. Her throat tightened and her eyes burned. She whispered, "Are you sure?" Even though she already knew the answer, he nodded. "I'm sorry." Lily sat down on the porch steps, tears rolling down her face. She didn't cry loudly. It was the quiet kind of grief, the kind that comes when your heart simply can't hold the sadness inside. She kept thinking about how he had smiled just the evening before, telling her about the garden he wanted to fix up in spring. The next few days felt empty. The neighborhood seemed quieter than ever. His house, once filled with the sound of laughter and old jazz records, now stood silent. She couldn't bring herself to walk past it without her chest tightening. A few days later, the local paper ran a small notice about his passing. There wasn't much, just his name, age, and the date. It broke Lily's heart to see such a small mention for someone who had lived such a full life. When the day of the funeral came, Lily made sure to go. It was a small service at a simple cemetery just outside town. Only a few people were there, 2 older neighbors, the pastor, and one man Lily didn't recognize. The stranger stood quietly near the back, dressed in a dark coat, his hands folded. He didn't speak to anyone, but his eyes stayed on the casket the entire time. Lily placed a single white flower beside the coffin before stepping back. The pastor spoke gently about kindness and compassion, about how one life can touch another in unexpected ways. Lily listened, tears quietly streaming down her cheeks. After the service ended, people began to leave. The man in the dark coat stayed behind, standing still as if lost in thought. Lily hesitated for a moment, then walked over to him. "Were you a friend of his?" she asked softly. The man turned toward her. He looked to be in his late 30s, with sharp eyes and a calm but tired expression. "Yes," he said after a pause. "In a way, I'm his son." Lily froze. For a second, she didn't know what to say. "His son?" He nodded. "Yes, I'm Daniel Thompson." Her mind flashed back to all the nights she had heard Mr. Thompson talk about his son. The pride, the sadness, the longing. "He talked about you," she said quietly. Daniel looked down, his voice low. "I wish I could have talked to him too." They stood in silence for a moment, the wind moving gently through the trees. Lily could see the regret on his face. It wasn't the kind that comes from guilt alone. It was deeper, heavier, like a man carrying too many what-ifs. "He really missed you," Lily said softly. Daniel nodded. "I know, I wanted to come back so many times. But I kept telling myself I'd do it later. I was always busy, traveling, working, building things that I thought mattered. Now I realize I waited too long." Lily wanted to comfort him, but she knew no words could ease that kind of pain. So she just said, "He wasn't angry with you. He only ever spoke kindly. He was proud of you, even if he didn't say it directly." That made Daniel smile faintly. "He used to write letters, didn't he?" Lily's eyes widened. "Yes, he showed me his journal, full of letters he never sent." "I found them," Daniel said quietly. "The lawyer gave them to me. He must have kept them all these years." Lily's throat tightened again. She could imagine the old man sitting by his lamp at night, writing letters he knew might never be read, pouring love and regret into each page. Daniel glanced at her. "You were the one who visited him every day, right? The one who brought him meals." "Yes," Lily said softly. "I didn't want him to be alone." He nodded slowly. "Thank you for being there when I wasn't." Lily looked at him, and for a moment she could see Mr. Thompson's eyes in his. The same kindness, the same quiet sadness. After a moment, Daniel said, "Would you mind telling me more about him? What he was like in the last year?" So they sat on a nearby bench and Lily told him everything. About the soup, the stories, the laughter, the small gifts. She told him how his father had looked forward to every evening, how he had started smiling again. Daniel listened without interrupting, his eyes fixed on the distance. When she finished, he said, "You gave him something I couldn't. Peace. I think that means more than anything I could have done." They sat quietly for a long while after that. When they finally stood up, Daniel said, "I want to do something for you, Lily, for what you did for my father." She shook her head quickly. "Please, you don't have to." I didn't do it for anything in return. I know, he said gently. That's what makes it special. Before she could respond, he added, but still, I'd like to see you again. There's something I want to give you, not today, but soon. Lily nodded, unsure what he meant, but she agreed. They exchanged phone numbers, and he thanked her once more before leaving. That evening, Lily went home and sat quietly in her kitchen. The house felt too still. She opened her journal and carefully placed one of Mr. Thompson's old notes, the one that said, "Dinner was wonderful as always. You make an old man's days brighter." Between the pages, she whispered, "I'll miss you, old friend," before closing it. Over the next few days, she couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. Not in a romantic way, but in a curious one. She wondered what kind of man he was, what kind of life he had built that kept him away for so long. A week later, Daniel showed up at her door. He was holding a small envelope in a brown box. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said. "Not at all," she replied, inviting him in. He handed her the envelope first. "This was for you. My father left it with his lawyer. He said you should have it." Lily carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter in Mr. Thompson's handwriting. Her eyes filled with tears as she read the first line. "My dear Lily, if you are reading this, then I have already gone. Don't be sad, my friend. You made my last year on this earth full of laughter and warmth. You reminded me what kindness looks like. I had nothing left to give but my gratitude, and I hope this small gesture shows how much you meant to me." Lily looked up, confused. "What gesture?" Daniel pointed to the box. "Open it." Inside, neatly stacked, were papers, documents, and a small old-fashioned key. Lily stared at him. "What is this?" Daniel smiled faintly. "It's his house. He left it to you." Her eyes widened. "What? No, that can't be right. I can't—" "He wanted you to have it," Daniel interrupted gently. "He said this home felt alive again because of you. He wanted you to keep that feeling going." Lily was speechless. She looked down at the letter again, her hands trembling. Daniel continued softly. "He also left a note for me. He said if I ever wanted to honor his memory, I should start by thanking the young woman who gave him friendship when no one else did." Tears filled her eyes again. "I didn't do anything special. You did everything," Daniel said. "You gave him a reason to smile again." For the first time in days, Lily smiled through her tears. She didn't know what to say. She just held the letter close to her heart and whispered, "Thank you." Daniel stood quietly for a moment before saying, "He always said kindness has a way of coming back. Maybe he was right." Lily nodded, tears still in her eyes. "Yes," she said softly. "Maybe he was." Lily sat at her small kitchen table long after Daniel had left, the letter still open in front of her. The paper had soft creases from her trembling fingers, and she could still smell the faint scent of the old man's home on it. A mix of books, wood polish, and time. She read the words again and again, as if she were afraid they might disappear if she blinked. Mr. Thompson's handwriting was shaky but steady enough to carry warmth. Each line felt like he was still there, speaking softly to her. He had given her his house. The thought alone made her heart ache. She didn't care about property or money. She would have given it all back just to share one more meal with him. But knowing he had thought of her before he passed filled her with something she couldn't quite explain. Sorrow, gratitude, and love all at once. The next morning, Lily decided to visit the house. She hadn't stepped inside since the day he passed. Walking up the familiar path made her chest tighten. The garden was quiet, the flowers dry, but the sight of his porch brought back 1,000 small memories. The evenings they'd sat together, the laughter, the stories. She unlocked the door with the key Daniel had given her. The smell of old wood and tea still lingered. Everything was just as he had left it. The lamp by the couch, the books neatly stacked on the shelf, the blanket folded on the armchair. For a moment, she half expected to hear his voice say, "Ah, you're right on time, Lily." She walked slowly through the rooms, touching the old furniture, the framed photographs, the tiny trinkets he used to tell stories about. On the coffee table, there was still a teacup, his last one, probably from the night before he passed. She picked it up carefully and held it for a long time. She sat on the couch and closed her eyes. The house was quiet but not empty. It felt like his presence still lingered there, calm and gentle. A few days later, Daniel called her. His voice was softer than before, less guarded. "I just wanted to check in," he said. "Have you decided what to do about the house?" "I went there yesterday," she said. "It still feels like he's there." Daniel was silent for a moment. "He'd like that," he said finally. They spoke for a while, mostly about small things. But before hanging up, Daniel said something that caught her off guard. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what my father wrote to me, about doing something in his memory. I want to start something. Meaningful." "What do you mean?" she asked. "I'll tell you when we meet," he said. "Are you free tomorrow afternoon?" Lily agreed. The next day, they met at a small cafe near the town square. Daniel looked different this time, not as sharp and distant as before. He smiled when he saw her and waved her over. "I hope you didn't walk too far," he said. "I don't mind walking," she replied with a small smile. "It helps me think." They ordered coffee, and for a while they just talked. He asked about her job at the bakery, about her daily routine, and she noticed how genuinely he listened. Finally, he leaned forward. "I've made a decision," he said. "I want to open something in my father's name, a place where people who are lonely like he was can come to eat and talk." "A community kitchen." Lily's eyes widened. "That's a beautiful idea. I want it to be more than just a kitchen," he continued. "A place where people feel welcome, somewhere they can share meals, stories, even music. Somewhere my father would have felt at home." Lily smiled. "He would have loved that." Daniel looked at her with a small smile of his own. "I want you to help me run it." She blinked in surprise. "Me? Yes, you already know what kindness looks like. You gave it freely. I can handle the financial side, but I need someone who understands the heart of it." Lily didn't answer at first. She wasn't used to big offers or grand ideas. She was just someone who had tried to do a good thing for her neighbor. But when she thought about how happy it made Mr. Thompson to have company every evening, she realized this could bring that same feeling to others. "I'd love to help," she said finally. Daniel smiled. Then it settled. Over the next few weeks, they began planning. They found a small empty building downtown, once an old diner, and decided to renovate it. Daniel handled the paperwork and funding, while Lily helped design the space. She chose warm colors, cozy chairs, and framed pictures for the walls. She even brought one of Mr. Thompson's photos to hang near the entrance, the one of him and his wife beside their blue car. They called the place the Hearth Room because, as Lily said, every good story begins around a warm meal. The first day the doors opened, the place filled with people. Some were elderly and alone, some were young families struggling to make ends meet, and others were just curious. Lily greeted each person with a smile, just like she had greeted Mr. Thompson so many evenings before. Daniel stood near the back, watching quietly as she moved from table to table, checking on everyone. At one point, an older woman grabbed Lily's hand and said, "You remind me of someone I used to know, someone kind." Lily smiled. Maybe kindness looks the same no matter who gives it. By evening, the little kitchen was buzzing with laughter and conversation. Music played softly from a speaker, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. Lily felt her heart swell as she looked around. It wasn't just a kitchen, it was a home. After closing, Daniel helped her clean up. He leaned against the counter, smiling. "You were amazing today," he said. "I just tried to make people feel welcome," she replied. "That's exactly what my father would have wanted." Lily smiled faintly. "I think he'd be proud of both of us." They turned off the lights, and as they stepped outside, the cool night air carried the faint sound of laughter still lingering from inside. Lily looked up at the stars and thought of Mr. Thompson, how one small act of kindness had brought her here. In the following months, the Hearth Room became a cornerstone of the community. People came not just to eat but to share stories, memories, and even small joys. Volunteers started joining. Local shops donated food, and sometimes musicians played soft tunes during dinner. Daniel often said, "It's not just a kitchen. It's a second chance for people to feel seen." And for Lily, it was more than that. It was her way of keeping Mr. Thompson's memory alive, through every bowl of soup she served, every smile she gave. One evening, when the day had quieted and the last guests had left, Daniel brought out an old box from the back. "I found this while sorting through some of my father's things," he said. Inside were small keepsakes, a few photographs, a pocket watch, and a stack of letters. "He wrote these after my mother passed," Daniel said softly. He must have never mailed them. Lily picked one up gently. He wrote to her even after she was gone? Yes, I think it helped him feel close to her, Daniel said. He was good at holding on to love even when it hurt, Lily smiled. That's what made him special. They sat together reading a few of the letters in silence. Most of them spoke about simple things, the weather, his garden, his memories. But every now and then, a line would make them both smile. He really was a storyteller, Daniel said quietly. Lily nodded, and he's still telling stories. Through this place. Through us. Daniel looked around the softly lit kitchen, the warm colors, the laughter still echoing in his memory, and said, You know, my father used to tell me that true wealth isn't in money. It's in how many lives you touch, Lily smiled. Then he was one of the richest men I ever knew. They sat there for a while talking about life, choices, and how strange it was that two strangers could meet through kindness. Eventually, Daniel looked at her and said, You changed his life, Lily, and in a way you changed mine too. Lily looked at him, her eyes soft. He changed mine first. The lights dimmed and the room fell into a peaceful silence. Outside, the street was calm and the stars blinked faintly above. Lily thought about how much had happened, how something so small as sharing a meal had become something much bigger. She realized that maybe kindness had a way of finding its path. It traveled from one heart to another, never really ending. And as she locked the door to the hearthroom that night, she whispered softly, Good night, Mr. Thompson. You'll always have a seat here. Months passed, and the hearthroom had become more than just a place for meals. It was now the heart of the neighborhood, a warm space where laughter, stories, and kindness flowed like the smell of soup from the kitchen. People from all walks of life came through its doors. Some came hungry, some came lonely, and some came just to sit and talk. Lily had grown into her role beautifully. Every morning she arrived early, opening the doors before the sun had fully risen. She'd wipe the tables, arrange the flowers, and prepare the first pot of tea. She liked those quiet moments before the day began. They reminded her of the early mornings when Mr. Thompson used to wait on his porch, smiling at her with that gentle look in his eyes. She often imagined him sitting in his favorite corner at the hearthroom, listening to the chatter and watching people eat. She liked to think he'd be proud of what had become of his memory. Daniel came by often, too. Even though his company kept him busy, he made time to visit the kitchen whenever he could. Sometimes he'd roll up his sleeves and help serve food. The volunteers found it surprising at first, a billionaire scooping soup beside them. But Daniel never made a big deal out of it. He always said, Here we're all the same. Over time, the two of them, Lily and Daniel, had become close friends. They often stayed late after everyone had gone, sharing coffee and talking about life. Daniel would tell her stories from his travels about cities full of lights and people rushing everywhere. Lily would listen quietly, smiling, and then tell him about the small joys she found in ordinary days. A good loaf of bread, the sound of rain, a stranger's smile. One night, as they sat outside on the steps after closing, Daniel looked at her and said, You know, I used to think success was about how high you could climb, but watching you here, I think it's really about how far your kindness can reach. Lily smiled softly. Kindness doesn't need to reach far, she said. It just needs to be real. Daniel nodded. That's something my father would have said. The following weeks were busy. The hearthroom began receiving attention from local newspapers and even a few TV reporters. They called it a place that feeds both the stomach and the soul. Donations started pouring in, and soon they were able to expand, adding a small library corner, a play area for children, and even a community garden out back. Lily would often walk through the garden in the evenings. The air smelled of herbs and soil, and she'd whisper quietly, This is all for you, Mr. Thompson. It was her way of saying thank you. One afternoon, an elderly woman came in carrying a small box. Her name was Mrs. Green, and she said she had once lived on the same street as Mr. Thompson. I heard what you've done in his memory, she said, her eyes glistening. He was a good man, quiet but kind. He helped me fix my fence once and refused to take money for it. She opened the box and showed Lily a few old photographs. Mr. Thompson smiling beside his wife, younger and full of life. I thought you might want these here, Mrs. Green said. He'd like knowing people still remember him. Lily accepted the photos with tears in her eyes. Later, she framed them and hung them near the entrance, right above the words painted on the wall. Kindness never leaves. It simply finds new homes. That evening, as the dinner rush ended, Daniel arrived with some exciting news. "We got approved for a grant," he said with a grin. "It means we can open another hearth room, maybe in the next town over." Lily's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes," he said. "We'll need to train new staff, set up the kitchen, find volunteers. But it's happening." She laughed with genuine joy. "That's wonderful. Imagine more people being helped, more hearts being touched." Daniel looked at her warmly. "All because you decided to feed an old man one day." Lily's smile faded into a thoughtful expression. "It's strange, isn't it? How one small choice can change so many lives," he nodded. "It's like a ripple in water. It just keeps spreading." That night, after everyone had left, Lily stayed behind for a while. The place was quiet, the lights soft. She walked to the photo wall and looked at Mr. Thompson's smiling face. "I hope we're making you proud," she whispered. And in that stillness, she almost felt like she could hear his gentle chuckle, the same one he used to give whenever she insisted he take a second helping of soup. Time moved forward. The hearth room expanded to 3 more towns, each one carrying the same warmth and heart. People began sharing stories, how the meals helped them through rough times, how they found friends there, how it reminded them that they weren't alone. Lily never sought fame or recognition. She preferred to stay in the background, serving quietly, listening, and comforting. She often said, "The best part of kindness is when no one knows who gave it." Daniel, on the other hand, made sure people knew the inspiration behind it all. In interviews, he would always mention his father's name, and the young woman who had shown him what true compassion looked like. One day, the hearth room received an invitation from the mayor's office. They were being recognized for their work in supporting the community. Daniel insisted that Lily come along to the ceremony. "I don't like public events," she said with a shy laugh. "Too bad," he replied. "You deserve to be there." The hall was filled with people that evening. When it was their turn to speak, Daniel stepped up to the microphone first. He spoke about his father, how he had been a simple man who valued kindness above all else, and about Lily, the neighbor who had turned loneliness into legacy. Then he turned to her and said, "This place exists because one person cared enough to knock on a lonely man's door." The crowd applauded, and Lily felt her eyes well up. She wasn't used to praise, but in that moment, she realized how far that single act of kindness had traveled. Later that night, as they walked out of the hall, Daniel handed her a small envelope. "Open it when you get home," he said. When she did, she found a letter inside handwritten in Daniel's handwriting. It read, "Lily, you gave my father something I couldn't, peace and friendship in his final days. Because of you, I learned what real wealth means. Thank you for reminding me of what matters most. The hearth room may have started with my father's name, but it lives because of yours. I hope we keep building this together, for him, for us, and for everyone who needs a little warmth in their lives. Daniel." Lily pressed the letter to her heart and smiled. Years went by, but the hearth room continued to grow. Children who once came there hungry grew up and came back to volunteer. People who had once been helped now helped others. The walls were covered with photos and stories, all reminders that kindness never fades. Lily still worked there every day, her hair a little grayer now, her smile just as bright. Sometimes she'd sit by the window during the quiet hours, holding a cup of tea, thinking of the old man who had started it all. One evening, a young girl came up to her and said shyly, "Miss Lily, why did you start this place?" Lily smiled gently. "Because once a kind man needed a friend, and I realized the world could always use a little more kindness." The girl thought for a moment, then said, "When I grow up, I want to do what you do." Lily touched her shoulder softly. "Then you already have just by saying that." That night, as she locked the doors and turned off the lights, she looked up at the wall of photos once more. Mr. Thompson's face smiled back at her. "Warm. Content eternal," she whispered softly. "Thank you for letting me be part of your story." The stars outside glimmered faintly through the window. Somewhere it felt like a circle had closed, one life touching another, one kindness leading to countless more. And so in a small corner of the world, A young woman's simple act of feeding her lonely neighbor continued to feed hearts for years to come. Because sometimes, the smallest kindness doesn't just change a moment, it changes everything.